Okay. Can the Zoom folks hear me okay? Yes, great.
We'll check their audio.
Brad, can you say hi to make sure we can hear you?
Hello.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, everyone. It is 6:02 and we have a quorum, so we will call the meeting to order. And Vicki is here as our minute taker. Thank you. And Erin Jipner is going to be our timekeeper. So we're going to start with public comment, and I have two folks' names down on the speaker list. If there are other people here that want to speak, well, we can call on you also, and then we'll go to folks online. I just want to appreciate people for coming out and joining us this evening and sharing your thoughts. We do have a full agenda, so we're hoping folks can limit their comments to about 2 minutes each, but we appreciate what you have to share and it's important. So we also just want to honor that. And
Krista, can I make a suggestion?
sure.
We have quite a few new board members tonight.
Yes,
Might make some sense to do a round of introductions for everybody.
sure. Is everybody okay if we start with that? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we'll start there. So we'll go around and introduce ourselves, the board members that are here, and then those that are online. Kristen, can you?
Could I ask a favor?
Sure.
I'm really hard of hearing. I've got hearing aids but I still can't hear anything.
Okay, we will do our best to project out.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And then if you want to move your chair closer, feel free. Okay. Can you kick us off?
Yeah,
Great.
I'm Kristen Toy and I'm from Starksboro.
Hi, I'm Barb Crandall and I'm from Mountain.
Bailey Lane Gordon from Moncton.
Steve Rooney from Starksboro.
Justin Pearson from Moncton.
Erin Jipner from Bristol.
Krista Siringo from Bristol
Patrick Green, Superintendent. Mike Dash from Bristol. Also.
and Brad,
Brad Johnson from Starksboro.
Liz,
Liz Sayre from Bristol.
Kathy,
Kathy Apgar, New Haven.
Katrina,
Hi, I'm Katrina DiNapoli. I'm the Assistant Superintendent and also a Moncton resident.
and Floyd was just here,
Yeah.
our business manager. But there we are. Thanks, Steve. Okay, so back to public comment. So we'll take folks that are here in person and then we'll go online. So Elisa.
Does it matter where I stand?
No, this recording should follow you.
All right.
Okay.
I am being flanked.
Hang on 1 second. Yes.
If you could say and spell your name, please.
Absolutely. My name is Elisa Cobb, Elissa. Last name Cobb,
And which town are you from?
Bristol.
Thank you.
I am a Bristol native. I am a graduate of the Bristol schools, as were my mother, my 3 daughters, 2 of my grandchildren, and before we know it, my 3 great-grandchildren. My ancestors have lived here in Addison County for over 300 years. I still live here, and I always will. My investment in this community is boundless because it's my home. Thank you for listening tonight. I especially thank Krista, board chair, and the people that have chosen to come and stand behind me tonight. I have great respect for all of you. 3 years ago, the murder of George Floyd broke me open and started me on the personal path to understanding racism. 2 years ago, the student created Mount Abe Anti-Racist Coalition held a series of Zoomed community discussions. At one such meeting, hearing the anguished pleas from BIPOC students and their parents, which were met with defensiveness, dismay, and indifference, broke me down even further. This student group became so frustrated with the attendees at these meetings that the coalition inevitably but sadly collapsed. For my own growth, I have spent the last 3 years seeking uncomfortable anti-racist education from organizations such as the Center for the Study of White American Culture, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, White Awake, Resma Menachem, the Embodied Social Justice Summit, and Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams. Even though I learned and am daily still learning how to sense my body's responses to racism, how to lean into the emotions that arise, how American history has been kept from me by design, the value and the necessity of talking about racism, and the need for me to drop my white-bodied propensity for defensiveness. There is still so much more to learn, experience, question, and deepen into. Last year, I joined this board's Community Engagement Committee, encouraged that I might be able to influence you all to view racism through a much more critical lens. Then 2 weeks ago, the racial incidences at Bristol Elementary occurred at the great dismay of many Bristol residents. All of the above is what brings me here tonight. I cannot wait for my 5-year-old great-granddaughter Ophelia to get here at Mount Abe, sense the environment, and come to me and say, Gigi, you knew about this and you didn't do anything? I can't wait for that. I came here to ask you to sincerely consider these things, to stay in the conversation about racism, to lift it up and speak about racism without allowing your focus to divert to other equity issues that are also important. I also ask you to consider, to understand that to be an anti-racist white-bodied person, ongoing action is required. To be anti-racist means to act consistently against racism. And to imagine also the beginnings of an ongoing anti-racist plan for change in our schools. It's easy to be white. Most of us white-bodied people have the luxury of turning away from our discomfort about racism, of assuming that it doesn't really exist here in rural Vermont, of waiting in hopes that the next racial slur will not happen, or of complacency that tricks us into thinking actions take time and can wait. Most of us white-bodied people can go home at the end of the day, make dinner for our families, and forget that racial problems exist. Our community members of color do not have any of these luxuries. Not the Asian man, a senior at Mount Abe in 2021, who participated in the Mount Abe Coalition meetings, who wept as he told of his personal story of racial abuse and indifference at our school here at Mount Abe, only to be met with microaggressions from the adults on the Zoom screen and no protection by the two facilitators. It's not for the Bristol mother who at this same meeting expressed how her Black daughter was afraid to play outside in her own yard because there had been racial threats against her life. Not for the Black child who was called a nigger at Bristol Elementary School by 2 different people on 2 different days, just days ago. No luxury, not safe, not protected. Actions held back. Front Porch Forum has gone quiet until the next time something happened. I want to quote Black American poet Claudia Rankin, who said, "There's really no mode of empathy that can replicate the daily strain of knowing that as a Black person, you can be killed for simply being Black. No hands in your pockets, no music playing, no sudden movements, no driving your car, no walking at night, no walking in the day, no turning onto this street, no entering this building, no standing your ground, no standing here, no standing there, no talking back, no living while Black." I have learned that when I avoid facing towards the harms of racism that I see around me, I am also harmed. I am kept from my own freedom. I take to heart the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, a Black woman civil rights activist who said, "Nobody's free until everybody's free." I have empathy for white-bodied people. After all, I am one. Often we don't know what to do or what to say when it comes to the uncomfortable aspects of racism. But I admit to struggle that I'm struggling with my patience, with myself and with others here, because there are so many opportunities to learn how to engage in forward-moving conversations, opportunities to study with teachers who challenge us, to become okay with messing up, making mistakes, and how to learn something from saying the wrong thing, how to own our whiteness and all that means, and how to grow our roots. These are all actions of anti-racism. This is the kind of action that is effective and needed. This kind of action sends out ripples into our families, our communities, and to our white culture that inspire others to do the same. These are much more powerful than picket signs. These are actions that make us anti-racist. As a member of this board's Community Engagement Committee, I am considering this board's ENDS document, which outlines the intellectual, social, emotional, and community-oriented skills that our community feels are invaluable to instill in our students prior to graduation from Mount Abe. We are now living in a time when we both unconsciously and often unintentionally play a part in racism by not fully understanding how it is present in our daily white lives, from our American history to our community equity to our worldview. Anti-racism is the most important thing we can teach our young people. Developing their understanding of racism and taking action as anti-racist young citizens is a huge and long needed cornerstone of their foundation for community living. I can only wish I had had that opportunity as a Mount Abe graduate myself. My curiosity about how curriculum gets developed at Vermont schools led me to have a long conversation with Sigrid Olson at the Vermont Board of Education, in which I learned that each community has the ability to create, enhance, and develop the courses it includes in its curriculum. Also, we have other Vermont schools to look to for direction, such as Winooski High School, whose principal said in the Vermont film, "I am from here," every school should have a plan in regard to anti-racism. I am here to ask you to consider adopting such a plan, and it would include, number one, an anti-racism course in our students' curriculum that is mandatory for all of our white-bodied students as a requirement for graduation, and that can be made available to parents and community members. My research shows that there are national organizations ready to help implement such a course, such as the Center for the Study of White American Culture, with whom I have already spoken. Number two, a plan to seek out and hire BIPOC teachers and staff within the next 5 years. Number three, the hiring of a trauma specialist for our students, someone who has deeper training and experience in trauma, especially racial trauma, than the DEI program can provide. Number four, an earnest, thorough, and honest evaluation of what United States history is currently being taught, how it is being taught, and what is not being taught, followed by actions to include the missing in age-appropriate fashion, and also include our BIPOC students in the conversation appropriately free from expectations and microaggressions. Number five, an immediate revision of current school policies, procedures, and statements regarding the board's views on racism and racial incidences to include clear action steps that support both the perpetrator of racial harm and the BIPOC student who has been harmed, support that reaches the parents and the community at large within 24 hours of any incident. And number six, an emphasis on the modeling of empathy throughout curriculum and activities. I admit this is a lot. This work is hard, and it should be, given how long we have been set apart as white. None of us want to have to do it. It takes action. It takes the courage to look inward. It means opening our hearts and working from compassion. It means leaning toward our emotions and bodily sensations. It means wearing empathy on our sleeves. It means taking daily action for our own growth, for the growth of our community, the growth of our teachers, and the growth of our students. I am no expert here, but I know that I can't give up. For Ophelia's sake and for mine, I am here to help you any way I can. I'm here to stand with you going forward. It is time now to collaborate with the reality of racism right here in Bristol, right here in our schools. Let's not let all of the shocked and heartfelt responses to the recent Bristol Elementary racial incident die on the vine again, as other incidents have done in the past. Can we not work together to address our issues of racism? Each of you were elected by this community to give you the power to influence change. Thank you for stepping into this job. I know you are constantly confined and distracted by many other very big realities such as budget and time. And at the same time, I have great expectations for what you could accomplish on this enduring problem of racism in our schools during your time on the board. Thank you in advance for not turning away from this again. If you haven't already started this work as board members and as individuals, please begin tonight. And please never stop.
There is one more name on the list here.
Okay.
And I don't see any other community members there. Deb?
Hi,
Hi.
can you hear me with this mask on?
Yes.
Okay,
Can you say your name, please?
yeah, my name is Deb Merriman.
I'm sorry,
Deb,
Merriman.
you got it. Hello. I live here in Bristol too, and my grandsons go to our schools. So first and foremost, I'd like to voice my support to Alyssa and everything she presented. I feel compelled to speak tonight because I too attended the same anti-racist coalition group that Alyssa spoke about. At this meeting, some of our Mount Abe students were courageous enough to push their vulnerability aside and speak their truth about their experiences at our high school. These were tearful expressions of how they did not feel safe or heard in their time in our school system. I felt my body tighten up and my heart started beating faster the more I heard about their challenges. These children, the challenges these children were facing in our village and in our community. Now, a young child at BES has endured a racial slur. They do not want to go to school here anymore. They do not feel safe. What if that was your child? I, as a white-bodied person, can no longer put those overt racist acts heard on the news and in a box titled horrible, wrong, so very sad, but at least not here in my village, because racism is here and it's acted out in Bristol now. We need adults here to take action for our children and for future populations. We cannot afford to wait. There are many organizations out there that Elisa alluded to, expressed, who have extensive experience in guiding schools, students, and communities on ways to change to be anti-racist. I'm asking you also to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. So the only names I have on the speakers list, was there anyone else who had a brief comment to make?
I have a brief comment.
Okay,
My name is Patty Heatherly,
I'm sorry, can you spell your last name?
Heather, HEATHER, and then dash capital LEA. It's, in that I've done some communicating with the Equal Justice Initiative out of Montgomery, Alabama, and they have a lot of resources for schools to use.
Thank you. And I don't see anybody online. Elisa and Deb and Patty, if you have a copy or can leave us with a copy of your comments. Because they include some suggestions, that would be great. So we're going to move along in our agenda as we do. I personally, and I think the whole board really appreciates you being here and speaking up.
Separate plan page.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you.
All right, so we are going to move on to an action to approve the agenda. I know I have a few changes, and if anyone has any others, what we'll do is make the motion second and then discuss any potential changes before we move to act. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move.
In a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. We have at the bottom of the agenda, an executive session listed, but it's listed as anticipated and it doesn't have the full statute. We do need that executive session, and it is under Title I BSA 5, Section 313A3, evaluation of an employee. And this is our superintendent check-in, which I think I referenced in the chair notes. We are also under board management and governance. We're going to table action item A, approve policy 4.5, board members code of conduct, since that is not ready yet. So that'll get moved to a future meeting. Those are my two items. Does anyone have anything else?
And then I think I wanted to discuss potentially moving the board of directors policy out of the consent agenda and making a discussion item. But I needed a little more information, Patrick, before I requested that. Are you under a current deadline to sign contracts based upon this policy?
If we can have that adopted by the end of June, then I think we're fine. Then that,
Okay.
because that will make it clear what the salary ranges are, and we can be compliant with that policy going into July 1st, the new fiscal year.
Okay,
So in terms of timeline, Krista and I talked about this really briefly, but if that gets pulled from the agenda and discussed, it's totally fine. And I think depending on how much work we're looking to do, if it gets kind of kicked to the policy committee, I think the sort of backwards planning would be our second meeting in June would be when we want to adopt. Probably the second meeting in May is when we want to post for adoption. So we would just want to have any edits done before that second May meeting. Whether it's this group or the policy committee that does that work.
right.
So if we pull this item, we'll put it under board management and governance, item D. And my hope, if we do that, is that we would have a brief discussion about how to proceed versus getting in and sorry, let me pause. My hope is that first Patrick can explain to new board members what the director's policy is. And then we can have a brief discussion about the best way to proceed with some of the suggested changes. So that way we're not spending a ton of time tonight on those changes, but to give people some context. So knowing that, would you like to suggest that we pull that?
Yes,
Okay,
You do that, move it to tonight's discussion.
correct.
it'll be a discussion item, not an action item, because we didn't warn an action item.
So that's going to be D under board management and governance. Okay, so knowing all of those changes, do we have are we ready to?
I'll amend my motion as
Approve agenda with
with
suggested
those
changes.
changes.
Okay. Any other changes that folks have? Okay, all those in
Do you want to
favor?
check with the seconder, just make sure that we have the original motion and the seconder are both okay with that change?
Yeah, I'm okay. Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Oh, Brad had a,
Oh, did you have
I think he
something,
was
Brad?
raising his
No,
hand.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we are moving into, we have 3 executive sessions scheduled for this first part of our meeting. 2 are discipline of students, and what are these all under the same statute, Patrick?
Yeah, they're all three.
Okay, so all 3 fall under Title I VSA Section 313A7, academic records or suspension or discipline of students. And our hope is that we can dedicate 1 hour for all 3 of these. And so we have some folks here with us, and we need a motion to go into executive session. And we would be inviting in Patrick. Who else is going to join us?
Dina,
Dina Atwood is our counsel.
Shannon.
Shannon. So Shannon Warden, Aaron Thibault, principal and assistant principal. And then Ashley Smith. And then was anyone else here with you, Ashley? Is there anyone else that would be coming in with you? Okay.
Okay, so, and just to be clear, so we'll do 1, excuse folks, go right into the other, excuse folks, and then go to the third matter.
And then Andrew Jones would come into the second,
Okay,
and Tori Riley. Because I don't know that we'll actually come out of executive session, we'll just be.
so the board will stay
Mhm.
and folks will come in, okay? And then in the third, it's just
I think it's just.
us and you,
Yep.
okay. All right, so with all those folks being invited in, can I have a motion to go into executive session?
I move we go into executive session.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, and Aaron,
Yeah.
can you second?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of going into executive session under the stated statute and with the mentioned visitors, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so,
Excuse me, can I ask how you'd like that motion to read? I have to go into 3 executive sessions on the topic as stated in the agenda.
Yeah,
I think it's technically 1 executive session and there are gonna be 3
3
items
items.
that,
So just to go into executive.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so board members, are we gonna, we're gonna go.
and I'll create a Zoom room for the board members and invitees that are online. And I'll bring my computer to the campfire room.
Okay,
And I think procedurally, probably the board council and myself for 3 minutes, and then we'll invite folks in
okay.
just to sort of facilitate the process.
Okay, so we're back. No, wait, we're still waiting for other people.
do we need to text them? Are they all confused?
Here we go.
Comes Liz.
Kevin,
here.
And what are you, Kevin, trying to click back in or not? Brad, sorry.
Brad.
So I noticed we're back in the big room. Did we come to a-
No, we're gonna table that. 'Cause it wasn't warned on the agenda, and so we're just gonna, we started conversation that we realized it wasn't. So we're gonna,
died.
yes, the battery died. Sorry about that.
Oh, wait, thank you.
Yeah, so next up is executive limitations monitoring report from Patrick, as well as a bunch of other things. And I'm wondering, Patrick, how you feel? Oh, no, we didn't. I'm sorry. Okay. So I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Hold on.
Sorry, yeah.
As good job, but
You took
as
it out.
amended, which was taking out item item
B.
B. Kristen, would you like to redo your,
Yes, I will,
in a second?
yes.
Okay.
Who was the second?
Bailey. So all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Yeah. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the consent agenda passes. So next up is Patrick's Executive Limitations Monitoring Report 2.1, treatment of current or prospective students and parents and guardians. I'm wondering about how many other things we have on the May 23rd agenda. We have treatment of staff on that agenda. What's folks' interest in putting that onto the May 23rd?
So you're on monitoring report 2.1.
Yep.
Moving that.
Moving that to May 23rd and 23rd.
Is it worth checking to see if there is an interest in lots of discussion or not? Sometimes these have lots of discussion, and sometimes they don't.
That's a good point. I did get a worksheet from Kevin, which had one very small comment. So
I had 3 comments that I was gonna bring up.
how long are they?
You can never tell.
This is true.
Phrases, paragraphs.
That may be enough to know that postpone, so
Okay.
not shortchange the conversation.
Okay, so we're gonna go to May 23rd with that. Okay, so,
We need a motion.
Yep.
I move, we move, item A under executive limitations, monitor report 2.1 to the May 23rd
third,
agenda.
a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to the financial report. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Moving on to the superintendent's report. Questions or comments? Thank you for doing that.
Again, enjoying them.
We'll continue to work on getting them out on Fridays. It's
Right.
sometimes harder than it seems to get all the pieces together.
So moving part.
I'm excited the lobby's closed.
We are, so we're
Maybe May.
tabling we already tabled, action item A, B, Community Engagement Committee. Update, questions or comments?
Where did we end up with the director's policy?
Item D, right?
Yeah, we're not there
For
yet.
discussion.
Yeah,
Okay, hearing none. Oh, sorry. I'd like to very strongly encourage all board members to attend the screening on May 8th. Okay, discussion, elementary school choice. So our hope was to determine after some conversation about background, other policies and things that have happened in the area and our understanding of what our current procedure is, which is we do not have a policy, and what that impact is, that we could determine whether or not we wanted to form a policy. Not necessarily form the policy, but whether or not we wanted to form one. So that seems like a discussion that would take a bit of time, and I'm thinking we can move that to May 23rd as well, which is getting pretty full.
Krista, is it possible to have a little more information about how other districts handle school choice before we
So,
start that
yes.
discussion?
Yes, thank you. So if you go up to the board share notes in the agenda, you should see. Yeah, oh, that's because I sent it out. I completed it after. I'm going to send you what I sent to Jennifer after she posted the chair notes, which was example policies.
Thank you.
Very question for you.
And I can, I have just a brief, I guess, comment that came out of a conversation we had as a leadership team with building principals and central office leaders around this sort of concept, and it relates to examples of what happens in other districts for what it's worth. And I can just sort of make the comment, people can think on it between now and the next time we come back, and then dig into the conversation if it sounds like we're moving toward tabling. We looked at the Addison Northwest. They have actually 2 policies and 2 procedures. They have an elementary school choice policy and an elementary school choice procedure. And essentially that is, people fill out the year prior expressing interest with no necessarily qualifying factors. It's just, I want to be in a different school and here's my information and I'm entered into the lottery, basically. They also have an elementary school transfer policy and transfer procedure, which is basically for extenuating circumstances when it makes sense for a student to attend a school in a town other than where they reside. And it kind of gives the kinds of circumstances. It's essentially the superintendent's discretion to enable an elementary school transfer. And that can happen at any point in the year when the circumstances are such that it makes sense. So they have both of those. We talked about those two as examples as an admin team. And where the conversation went, there was consensus that there's concern around a choice policy for whatever reason a parent might have, and the impact that could have on whatever perceptions people have of a school and in-migration, out-migration, et cetera. So concerns there. It made sense to the admin team that having a transfer policy, that when there are extenuating circumstances, that we enable that because it just sort of makes sense for the student. So that was their perspective, that if we're going to have a policy, that it should be something more toward the transfer policy than the choice policy.
Okay, and then I just sent folks the resources that I pulled together as well. So I'd ask that you please do your homework before we meet again to talk about that, so we can have a focused conversation. So that's a discussion item, so we don't need a motion to table. And then the next is the director's policy, which we mentioned earlier. And so Patrick, can you just let folks know what the policy is, and then maybe Steve, you can just share the general theme of some of your suggested changes.
Sure.
So we have a number of folks in our district that are protected by a union contract, a negotiated agreement. So we have most of our support staff are protected by the support staff collective bargaining agreement, and most of our professional staff are covered by the professional staff collective bargaining agreement. We have a number of folks that don't fit into the recognized categories for those two collective bargaining agreements. Most of those folks, basically anyone that's not a director or an administrator, fit into this director's policy. So it's basically a contract for the folks that aren't protected by the union collective bargaining agreements. There are 35 to 50 people probably that fit under this. So everyone that's in ELP fits under this, food service fits under this, support staff that work at central office fit under this. And a couple of other kind of here and there kinds of positions. Generally speaking, the board of directors policy mirrors the language in the support staff collective bargaining agreement. So whatever percent new money gets applied to the salary grid in the support staff agreement is applied to this. So they tend to follow one another so that there's comparable compensation, benefits, et cetera, across. Similar working conditions as well. And so that's what this policy is. It is a little bit, there are some things that are different. The pay structure is different because of the range of different types of positions that this is trying to cover. There are certain categories of positions, and there are multiple positions that fit within each category. And then there's a relatively wide salary range for the positions that fit within that category. This isn't negotiated. This is a board policy. You get to write it and sign off on it, and it is what it is. But as I said, it tends to follow the collective bargaining agreement so that there's an attempt at providing equity across the two categories.
So Steve had some suggested changes to that, and we're not going to decide about adopting these changes now, but maybe you could just let folks know a couple of things we were noting. And then the plan would be to bring this to the May 23rd meeting to adopt,
Approved for posting,
to approve for posting
adopt in June.
and to adopt in June. What we need to decide, I think now, is whether these changes are for next year's policy or, and we will adopt it as it is for now, or there are changes we want to make before we adopt the policy this year.
Right. So this policy has been in place since I've been a board member, which is going on 6 years now. We've adopted it every year. There's nothing really earth shattering about it. I just took the opportunity to kind of go through it again and thought there could be some improvements. So if we decided we wanted to simply adopt it for the for expediency and to allow after to sign contracts based upon it, I don't think we would be putting ourselves at a disadvantage. It might be something we could defer to the policy and governance committee to kind of tweak, because this is a board policy. It has a, but the reasons that I wanted to sort of relook at it are there's four of them. One of them was that the new folks who are on the board don't know anything about this policy. So, so we wanted to take it off the consent agenda, basically to give folks a chance to understand what it does. Two, the title of this policy is a throwback to a document that was created God knows when, and it's very confusing. To call something the director's policy when really it's a contract agreement for miscellaneous support staff. I think it needs a new title. Right now, the pay schedule, I was looking when I first opened it up, I just wanted to check what you were mentioning, Patrick, that the pay schedule kind of followed the union contract in terms of the percentage increase of salaries. And I couldn't find the compensation schedule when I first looked at it, because I went through the policy and then hit the appendix. And I'm like, okay, so where do we talk about money? And then I noticed that it said on page 7, the pay shall be set by the board's compensation plan. Well, where's the board's compensation plan? And I scroll down through and I see that there's a schedule after the appendix. It's called something else. And you can tell that that's what's meant to set the wages is the schedule at the very end, but it really ought to be called the same thing that's called on page 7, and those things want to agree with each other, and it probably ought to be referenced as an appendix so you can find it. So it's really just kind of document cleanup. The last note is that it says the board will review this annually prior to setting the budget. So timing on this is a little odd. We might want to either reword that paragraph or release the timeline constraint or follow it more religiously. We want to maybe talk about the pros and cons of that, and talk about how we might want to. My feeling is that we might want to take this policy and make it part of the work of the negotiations committee, because the board has the responsibility to negotiate contracts. We have a negotiating committee that handles both the union contracts. Doesn't handle the superintendent's contract, but it could handle this contract.
And it kind of comes up in the support staff conversations, how it all fits together, but it's not an explicit conversation about.
Right.
And
And
I
I
sort
think
of
we could,
recognize that the practice is that this follows suit. Yeah.
yeah, and we could definitely do any tweaks to this particular policy during that negotiation. And come out of that negotiation with not only the union contract settled, but this thing cleaned up and ready to go to impact the budget in whatever form it's going to do that. So, my sense is that we could probably adopt this thing as it stands without really, as I said before, any real impact to our business. But I suggest that we move it into we assign it as a task for the policy and governance committee to kind of look at it and come back to the board with some suggestions for cleaning it up a little bit.
Kathy, you have your hand up. Thank you, Steve.
I was just wondering, how do those 35 to 50 people feel about this? Does anybody ever ask them, or did they ever chat with you all about this?
Yeah, so it's again, a lot of the folks are in central office, so it's circulated annually and folks have a chance to kind of weigh in. Some of the things historically that have changed recently, I'm thinking about prepayment for professional development. The language used to be that, you know, folks would spend their own dollars to pursue professional development and they would get reimbursed. There was an interest in shifting that to a prepayment benefit, and that happened and was adopted. So, but I will say there tend to be, that was the most substantive change in 7 years as superintendent since I've been here. There tends to not be a whole lot of change, because the things that matter most to most people, health insurance, compensation, health insurance is a statewide negotiated agreement now, so that's sort of moot. And the compensation tends to follow the support staff agreement, and that has been satisfactory to date. So there tends not to be a whole lot of discussion around this.
Bailey?
Did you say that the people that fall under this category, they still get contracts for the school year?
Yeah, so we issue, most of the folks under this they tend to be year-round employees as opposed to school year employees, but there are different categories differentiated in the policy. School year full-time, school year part-time, school year temporary, like several different categories that way.
Sarah?
Is there a good reason why it isn't all just in the same support staff contract?
They're not part of the,
They're not
formally part of the
recognized.
association, so they don't, they're not.
Thank you.
Yep.
So yes.
So I think what I'm hearing is we'll put it on the agenda on May 23rd to adopt. We can have a brief discussion again, maybe about what the change you propose and the fact that we're going to adopt it as is, and then work toward making these improvements for the next round.
Are we the people who edit the document, or does someone on your admin team edit it?
So
I know,
I
but
think-
that doesn't always mean we edit them.
I think the Bobby Joe created this draft with some of the strike throughs to update it to reflect this. So a couple of things that are important in terms of this whole sort of process. One is, unlike typically the collective bargaining agreements that are negotiated are for multiple years. So your opportunity to renegotiate, make changes is every 2 or 3 years typically. This is approved annually. So your opportunity to do some of the work that Steve talked about, you have every year that opportunity. So that's one piece to consider. In terms of timeline, it would be really important to have whatever's going to happen this year, if it's decided that this work will happen this year, that this gets adopted by the end of June. So that July 1st, which is when the new fiscal year starts, we have all this squared away and we can issue contracts and knowing that we're going to be compliant with this language, et cetera. Which comes to Krista's point, there's time to do that. So I think the question is how much time might it take to do what Steve talked about? Some of it's cleanup, which can go pretty quickly. Some of it may be a little bit more complicated and could take time. So I think the decision about whether to tackle that this year or later comes down to how much time we think we have, but it would need to be approved for posting in May. So that basically says to the community, hey, we're planning to adopt this policy. You're fairly warned. And then you would adopt in June and that would be fine.
So the people that fall under that category will not get a contract until after it's adopted? And do we need to worry about any of them going, whoa, where's my contract?
The
Looking
default would probably be to give them a contract that reflects what the current policy is if we
Yeah.
don't have a new policy adopted. So that would not include pay raises necessarily, et cetera. So
Yeah, my suggestion is to avoid all that.
Yeah,
Just adopt this thing as it stands right now, as I said.
And work on
and
it.
then
So
work
that's
on
how
it.
it-
I agree.
Set everybody up for this year, and then it's just on our work list for the Policy and Governance Committee to come back with a recommendation to tweak.
For next year, yeah. I like
which
that
might
idea.
include adopting it in
Earlier.
October or November if
Yeah.
we're going to change the timeline to impact the budget.
That's right.
And this is just a discussion item tonight, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
I like that plan.
So then I think we would,
So it sounds like we're going to put it as an action item to adopt in May.
typically we would do this in a consent agenda. Is that? Are folks comfortable with this in a consent agenda in a future meeting and we'll adopt it that way?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we were going to have an executive session, just more special time together, nobody else, with Patrick for a superintendent check-in. If you all are amenable to us postponing that, we've checked in a lot, we can always do more, but.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not gonna do that.
It's almost tomorrow. so-
It's almost. Yes. So.
Not tomorrow here.
I don't think we have anybody here in the public, we've worn them down. So,
I have the review up.
okay, so moving on to meeting prep, we have lots of agenda items that we've just moved around. Reminded everybody about the listen up screening. I also want to remind folks that we have a meeting with the Mount Abe Education Association on May 3rd at 6 p.m. And I think folks know about that because we took a pulse of folks' availability, but maybe the news people
What time is that?
are not aware of that. And Jennifer hasn't sent the agenda out yet. It's going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. So this is not a board meeting. This is a meeting entirely in executive session related to a grievance that is outstanding between the Teachers Association and the school board. Wasn't sure if it was the administration of the school board. And so we've been meeting somewhat regularly to get updates on one of the pieces of the resolution of that grievance. Can I say what that piece is?
Good. That sums it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so anyway, you will learn more about that on the 3rd. And we are very good about 6 to 8 p.m. that time.
Can I plant a seed? Given what May is shaping up to look like now? May 23rd?
I think I know what seed you're thinking of planting,
Okay.
and I wondered about that same
Let's
seed
see.
pod.
One of the things that we'll be talking about in May is around what training might the board be interested in, location for our retreat where some of that training would happen. So if you can just be thinking about topics for the retreat and location and dates for the retreat
Oh, then-
in August, that would be great.
It's usually the third week in August.
I think it's moved a little bit, but yeah, in that second or third week of August, somewhere in that.
So that's when it would happen, but we have to plan for it now.
Right, we'll have to pick a date and a location. Last time we were at the Moncton Town Hall, the new Moncton Town Hall, it was comfortable,
lovely.
accommodating. I thought the
appreciated
internet worked
that.
well, like.
The internet, well, yes,
the
we're
thing.
saying that because we were in Lincoln once at an amazing location, but internet was very spotty.
Yes.
AC.
And what maybe I'll do if folks like this idea is I could put out a little survey, seeing what topics people might be interested in talking about.
I'm curious what seed you thought of.
Yeah.
So our next meeting,
Yeah, can you talk about
Are
the next
we-
meeting?
Sorry. Yes.
The 11th or whatever.
So,
date that is?
so we have the grievance meeting on the 3rd. The listen up screening on May 8th, and our committee, our board meeting on May 9th. Our board meeting on May 9th is dedicated solely to committee work. So
Good.
this was where we are going to, it's a 2-hour meeting. It is a 2-hour meeting. I'm saying it out loud twice. And we're going to break up into groups and look at the charges together after we had that overview at our last meeting and finalize the charges, the configuration, all the things. Do that for a bit of time and then come back together and adopt them all.
Can you send that stuff to all the new people so you have to pick what committee you're interested in being on? and
Right,
then-
and so that's right. So Mike and Kathy were here for the
Right, but
committee presentation and background info, but Justin and Barb were not. And so we will send that to you as well. So that is just a few things coming up. Oh, one more thing. We also need to appoint a VSBA rep. So Steve noticed that we were supposed to vote on approving, was it the healthcare? agreement?
Yeah, well, apparently now,
Each
get it- we
each
get some-
supervisory union or district was supposed to submit a vote to approve the collective agreement that was settled on behalf of all school districts. And that triggered us realizing we don't have a rep at this time. And so it can look a couple different ways. In the past, some folks have been really dialed in, invested, attending all the VSBA meetings and regional meetings, which is great. It could be that level of commitment. It could also be that at the very least, we determine somebody, maybe one of the board officers who keeps track of VSB notice. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Notices and lets us know, oh, this is something we need to respond to, or this is coming up. So we don't need to do that today, but we'll need to think about what role that would fit in if there's somebody who's not already interested in doing that work on a statewide scale. Liz has her hand up. Liz.
Was Kevin previously doing that? Was that Kevin?
did it
And
for a
then
while.
my other-
He did it and then Dave did it, but I don't know if Kevin's been doing it for a while, so that's a good
Okay.
question.
So we'll think about that. And then also, if we're doing committee work on the 9th and we're on the community engagement committee and not the other ones, what does that look like for us? Do we just jump in another committee, or will we?
No, because I think it would be good for us to spend the time looking at our own charge
Right,
and evaluating that, seeing if it needs any revisiting. Yeah.
Okay, should we invite our whole community engagement?
That's a
Sorry,
good
it's
question.
late.
Yeah, we could. I will do that, but with
Okay.
full expectation that they'll, and no requirement that they be there.
well, you could just at least let them know what
Yep.
you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It goes,
Okay, that is it.
We did get a pretty urgent message from the VSBA, and I just think we should be aware of that with the PCB thing, so.
Yeah.
People should read that alert that we got.
I've drafted a letter, if you'd like to see it and maybe send,
Thank you.
I'll send it to you and you can tweak it a little.
Just today.
quarter four.
All right. Are we ready for the assessment?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You're postponing by agreement the second executive session. Do you not need a motion to do that since I'm.
Thanks. Okay,
So we do this evaluation at the end of every meeting, and it helps with one of the monitoring reports that we put out. So what was the level of engagement of all board members, high or low? I said high. Was the agenda followed? I said no. But feel free to have a different opinion. There was many adjustments and tweaks due to need for more information on certain topics, such as the board of directors policy, we moved monitoring reports, and then the length of the executive session overran and prevented some other things.
Perfect.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no?
Couple
it
hiccups.
could have been
Couple
better.
hiccups.
Could have been better this time.
So no,
Meh.
there's no maybe, so yes or no.
But an appreciation for the moving parts.
We'll do better now.
We'll do better.
Extremely okay.
We still survive.
Okay, is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of board process? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Other feedback for Krista? Thank you for the chocolate.
You're welcome.
What went well with the meeting?
Wasn't my favorite meeting.
Take something good.
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Some great community support.
Yes.
Yes.
Great insight.
I think even though we had hard topics,
Mm-hmm.
we handled them and it was insightful.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got a list with a pin in it.
And that's okay. Any ways to, or suggestions for improving future meetings? Less movement of the agenda.
Keep laptop power supplies with us.
Yeah.
Won't leave the.
Get Patrick
I
a
sh-
new
I
computer.
should have anticipated the 3-hour executive. session.
Speaking of executive session, what was the outcome of the executive session? I didn't hear that.
We
When
can't
you-
really.
We can't talk about it.
Well, we tabled it.
We tabled
last
it.
topic.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay. I didn't hear that part. Thank you.
All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn? I don't know, jump at once. And a second, Erin and Kristen. All those in favor of adjourning at 10:16 PM, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, everyone.
Yes, please come back.
Appreciate it. Yes.